Welcome to this OBO2 explainer. Today, we are going to trace the absolutely fascinating evolution of management thought. We'll be exploring the entire journey, starting from the early days of rigid, highly mechanical workplace systems all the way to our modern understanding of dynamic behavioral science. But right off the bat, let's dive into this by considering the very structure of your own modern workplace. Have you ever looked around your office and wondered, why is it set up exactly like this? Why are your shifts structured the way they are? Or why does your manager speak to you in a certain tone? Are you treated as just another cog in a machine or as a complex individual? Well, the answers to those questions aren't random at all. They're actually the result of over a century of evolving management theories. So here is our roadmap for today. We're looking at the chronological development of management perspectives, starting back in the late 19th century with the classical perspective. From there, you can see this progressive historical shift into the behavioral, quantitative, and eventually the contingency perspectives. Today, we're going to focus heavily on that massive leap from the classical right into the behavioral era, because honestly, that is where the modern, human-centric workplace was truly born.
All right, part one, the classical management era, a time when rules absolutely ruled supreme. We begin our journey at the dawn of the 20th century. Now, this was an era where the human element was, well, largely ignored in favor of pure output and mechanical efficiency. People were basically treated like machine parts. As you can see, classical management is built on three distinct pillars. First up, we have scientific management, which focuses purely on the individual worker's productivity. Next is administrative management, focusing on the actual functions of management itself. And finally, bureaucratic management, which zooms out to look at the overall organizational system. Let's break these down one by one.
Moving right into part two, Taylor's scientific efficiency and the relentless search for the one best way.
So, Frederick W. Taylor, often known as the father of scientific management, he believed that if you improved management practices, you directly improved productivity. Simple enough, right? But here's a quirky, yet kind of intense piece of history from this era's search for efficiency, the concept of Thurbligs. Thurbligs are fundamental human motions used in performing tasks. Literally things like searching for an object, grasping it, holding it, and positioning it. And yes, the word Thurblig is literally just the name of the theorists who came up with it, the Gilbreths, spelled almost entirely backwards. They carefully study these micro-motions to shave mere seconds off of tasks. If you think about the relentless tracking metrics used in modern warehouse packing today, yeah, they are direct descendants of these Thurbligs.
Part three, bureaucracy and administration, basically structuring the whole organization.
Moving beyond just analyzing the physical motions of individual workers, early theorists realized, hey, we also need to focus on the overall functions of management and the actual structural systems of the company. Which brings us to Henry Fayol. He looked at the big picture and developed these 14 general principles of management. Fayol was the first to recognize that successful managers had to understand basic functions like planning, leading, organizing, and controlling. And it's actually brilliant how sticky these ideas are. Just listen to some of these concepts. Unity of command, division of work, and remuneration, which just means fair wages. We still routinely use these exact concepts in almost every modern organization today. Then, Max Weber added to this administrative structure by envisioning what we now call bureaucracy. Weber's ideal system was completely impersonal and entirely rational. It relied on really firm rules, strict policies, a very fixed hierarchy of authority, and clear divisions of labor. Now, while it was originally designed to create fairness and predictability, you might recognize the extreme version of this today as endless corporate red tape. You can thank Weber for that.
All right, moving to part four, the behavioral shift. Finally, we bring in the human element.
Because eventually, the management world hit a massive turning point. Theorists finally had to wake up and acknowledge a glaring flaw in the classical perspective. Workers are not actually robots. Go figure, right? The social context of work, our higher human needs, and the basic variance between individual people actually matter. On the left here, we have the old classical perspective, represented by a mind focused purely on rigid rational behavior. But on the right, we see the behavioral perspective, which fundamentally acknowledges the massive importance of human psychology in shaping management style. It was a total shift from seeing people as tools to finally seeing people as humans. Enter Mary Parker Follett.
She was an absolute pioneer of this behavioral era, and she concluded that a key to effective management was actually coordination. She argued that management is this continuous, dynamic process where managers need to harmonize group effort, rather than just forcing and coercing people. She even felt that the best decisions are made by the people closest to the situation, not just dictated blindly from a boss at the very top of a fixed hierarchy.
We can see this shifting mindset super clearly in Douglas McGregor's famous concepts, Theory X versus Theory Y. It's a classic. Theory X is that old, classical management view. It assumes employees naturally just want to avoid responsibility and have to be directed, coerced, controlled, or outright threatened to get them to work. Theory Y, on the flip side, is the behavioral view. It understands that employees are naturally self-directed, they can actually enjoy work, and they actively seek out responsibility and want to use their creativity. Think about your own boss for a second. Are they managing you using Theory X or Theory Y?
Which brings us to part 5, motivation and human needs. What actually drives behavior?
This behavioral shift naturally bridges right into the specific theories that explain how motivation actually works. Because if you want people to perform well, you absolutely have to understand what drives them. To figure this out, theorists started comparing rigid structures, like Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs, to much more dynamic models like the ERG theory. The absolutely crucial concept here is the frustration regression principle. Unlike a strict ladder where you only ever move up, ERG theory highlights that if an employee's higher-level needs, things like growth and recognition, are frustrated or blocked by their workplace, they don't just stay put, they actually regress. They'll slide backwards and start focusing entirely on lower-level needs, like just basic pay or extreme job security, often becoming totally disengaged in the process.
Victor Vroom's expectancy theory further proved this human complexity. Vroom showed that positive motivation is fully dependent on a specific formula of 3 variables: expectancy, instrumentality, and valence. Let's look at a real-world application. Imagine an IT organization trying to motivate its engineers. Even if they achieve 2 of these variables, say the engineers know they have the skills, which is expectancy, and they know a reward is on the table, which is instrumentality, if that reward is something they literally do not care about, which is valence, their positive motivation just completely crashes. All 3 must be present, or the whole thing falls apart.
Okay, part 6, diagnosing behavioral problems. Let's put this theory into practice. So, how can we use this entire evolution of management thought to actually diagnose issues on your teams today? Well, first we have to clearly define what we are looking for. A behavioral problem is anything in the behavior of people that causes dysfunction or prevents them from fulfilling their personal or work objectives. Dysfunction itself is really just a disturbance in a person or system. Essentially, it's an outward symptom that points to a much deeper issue, kind of like how a physical fever points to an infection. By listing out these outward symptoms, modern managers can formulate an accurate diagnosis. On the top, we have personal problem behaviors affecting work, things like apathy, anxiety, or lack of anger management. These require empathy and perhaps employee counseling. But on the bottom, we have problematic work behaviors, like absenteeism, insubordination, or just huge resistance to change. These often point right back to structural failures in the organization itself. Differentiating between these 2 is absolutely crucial.
So wrapping up this explainer, I want you to reflect on your own workplace. Think about the symptoms and dysfunctions you see around you every single day. Are those issues driven by outdated mechanical structuring from the classical era, maybe way too much Weberian red tape and Taylor-style micromanagement? Or are they a result of a failure to motivate the complex, self-directed humans doing the work, completely falling short of modern behavioral needs? Understanding exactly how management got to where it is today is literally the first step in diagnosing how we can fix it for tomorrow. So what's your diagnosis? Thanks for watching, and keep exploring these incredible theories.